welcome everyone to this week's edition of Conversations in American Democracy. We have a great deal to speak about, and we'll hear from Vicki on the Belvedere terminals and 8,000 houses that now won't occur in Bunnell. Mike Leiberger is going to talk a little bit about opportunities for all of us to become involved in local government. There were some others. Sue Noble's not here to talk about. She was keeping track of executive orders, but we'll do those things. I have been starting by reading something from the Constitution, and we're up to describing and discussing the role of the Senate, but I'm going to take a breather from that because I'd like to read something else that I think is particularly relevant, and reference has been made to it. I don't know that everybody understands it. So this is talking about, first of all, the Reichstag. The Reichstag was the seat of the legislature in actually the Weimar Republic preceded Nazi Germany. Then the Reichstag fire was an arson attack on the Reichstag building, home of the German Parliament in Berlin, on the 27th of February 1933. Precisely 4 weeks after Adolf Hitler was sworn in as Chancellor of Germany. The Nazis attributed the fire to communist agitators and used it as a pretext to claim the communists were plotting against the German government and induced President Paul von Hindenburg to issue the Reichstag fire decree, suspending civil liberties and pursue a ruthless confrontation of the communists, these outside enemies. This made the fire pivotal in the establishment of Nazi Germany. One more little bit. The day after the fire, at Hitler's request, President Hindenburg signed the Reichstag fire decree into law through Article 40 of the Weimar Constitution. The Reichstag fire decree suspended most civil liberties in Germany, including habeas corpus, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, right of free association and public assembly, and the secrecy of the mail and telephone. These rights were not reinstated ever during the Nazi reign. The decree was used by the Nazis to ban publications considered not considered friendly to the Nazi cause, despite the fact that Marinus de Lubbe from the Dutch government claimed to have acted alone in starting the fire. Hitler, after having obtained emergency powers, announced that it was the start of a wider communist effort to take over Germany. Nazi party newspapers then published a fabricated story. This sent the German population into a panic, isolated the communists further among the civilians, and additionally, thousands of communists were imprisoned in the days following on the charge that the party was preparing to stage a putsch, a takeover of the government. I'll stop there because that seems to me to speak directly to what's going on in our country today. And we can do that, but let's stop for a second. I'm a big advocate of not paying attention to the national scene, but rather what's going on locally is also important. So let's go to Vicki, then briefly Mark, and then Mike. So Vicki, what's going on as far as Belvedere terminals and Bunnell's response and so on?
Well, what I can tell you is a group that I'm involved with here in town, Flagler 5051, a group of us went out Monday night to the Government Services Building, to the sidewalk, before they were having a meeting there in the building in regards to housing they want to build in Bunnell. And so we were all there out of our concern for the hazardous waste, potential hazardous waste facilities that could go into Bunnell. But the meeting there that night was about the housing and if they wanted the houses to go through. And as a group, one of our concerns is if the houses went through, would all of these people who bought property there be aware of the potential toxic waste area that they would be living by? People bought houses near the airport and now they're concerned about planes flying over their homes constantly every day. So would these people really be informed about the property they're buying? So we were there, for that reason, but inside in a bit was going to be about the housing. And several of our members did stay for the meeting, which lasted quite late until 10:30 at night. And in the end, that board, at least for now, voted no to the houses going in. So to many of the community members in Bunnell, they were very happy to hear that. However, the toxic waste potential area is still in the works. The most important meeting for that is this coming 23rd. So if you care about that and you're interested in that, locals, as well as our group, 5051, will be out there on the sidewalk again, waving signs about our concern about that potential area. We'll be out there from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. before the meeting. Hopefully I have that time right. You could double check on that meeting on the 23rd at the Government Services Building. So we'll be waving signs about it at the road, and then we'll move inside the building to the meeting, where they will have on the agenda that evening the potential toxic waste area. The government and the people who want this to go through, including someone on that board who owns that land and would gain, eventually gain a lot of money from the sale of that land, and she's on that board, have a lawyer they're utilizing. And so last meeting, a couple of meetings ago, the locals got up and spoke from the heart about why they didn't want this facility in their area, and all of their heart and soul was disregarded and was not put into the record. And the only thing that was put into the record were facts by the lawyer. So it moved forward, and so to my knowledge, this next time around, I believe that some of the citizens have retained a lawyer. Hopefully that's true, hopefully I have that right, but I have learned that in some private groups. So maybe at the meeting on the 23rd, the city and government or that person who owns the property's lawyer will be there. And then hopefully some of the residents have a lawyer to counter those facts that they wouldn't allow in last time. So that's the most important meeting. They need people to show up. So if you care about that, please come to the sign waving or come to the meeting. And if you can't make either of those, I was talking with someone at Dunkin' Donuts this morning and at my doctor's office this morning. They can't make it to those things. I encourage them to at least send an email. People have told me they would. That is one way you can help, by making a phone call or an email. It all matters. Every action matters.
Yeah, thank you.
Vicki, you're referring to, I'm unfamiliar with this, a toxic waste site.
Yes.
I was familiar with that there was an industrial zone level
Yes.
that would have allowed them to build the tank farms.
Right.
Is this a toxic waste zone something else?
Okay, so what happened a couple of meetings ago, they had a meeting to decide if they wanted to zone that for L2, which is a higher, you can Google it and look into it, but it's a higher level of
Industrial,
waste and
yeah.
toxicity. And they voted, the locals were begging for them not to rezone that. And the government officials did not listen to the people's wishes. Many people got up and spoke, and they chose to move it forward and rezone it for the L2.
Right, it's
So-
not, the term is not a toxic waste site though, is it?
Well,
That they're
it's
using?
hazardous. It's
hazardous?
hazardous waste. And so also, what a lot of locals don't realize is how much land they're zoning for this. The area, from what I'm told, is the size of 3 Disney Animal Kingdom parks. So that big of an area. And so the people who obtain it and buy it could keep the portion they want and then sell it off or rent it out to other businesses with the same agenda. And my husband sent me a news article yesterday, and I'm sure all of you can Google it, it was on the news last night, but fuel tank train went off the tracks yesterday somewhere here in America, and he was showing me that video, and it caused a big mess in whatever town that went off the tracks. Well, that's what they want to do here in Florida, is, have that gas and whatever they're trying to sell, hazardous materials come in, and we talked about that at one of our meetings, what all of those things were, because Kurt was under the assumption it was just one thing, and we read off a list of all of the toxic materials they want to bring in. So my husband was showing that video. All of you could Google, our watchers could Google yesterday what that train was carrying that went off the tracks, and that's our concern here locally. The what if, and that's why they're called accidents. Accidents happen. We don't mean for them to happen, and those the train tracks we have right here is what they want to utilize. Now the residents of Bunnell are all for money coming in. They're all for, businesses coming in that could help make the community money. And we all want that, I think. They're concerned about the level of hazardous waste that could be brought in. And so that's why we all need to be looking into it, concerned, informed, and that meeting on the 23rd is the most important one, because that's where they're gonna move it further along. So 2 meetings ago was about the rezoning and them upping it a notch for them to bring it in. And even though Mike Norris said no to Palm Coast, there was behind the scenes actions happening, because we believe that all of the local authorities and officials and leaders knew that there was a plan B right down the road in Bunnell. And my concern, and the group that I'm in's concern, is Flagler County and keeping Flagler safe, beautiful, for all of us, children, elderly people. And if, Mark and I have discussed this, that even if it was a little further out, however far that might be, 5 miles, 10 miles away from homes, people are showing up to these meetings that their homes, their property abut that. So the K section, anybody who hears this, if you're in the K section, that's what's coming your way right outside your back door. Another family member of the woman that's on the board who stands to make a lot of money from this, one of her family members, her home abuts it. And she was standing there at the meeting pleading with her relative, like, this is crazy, don't let this happen. So all that's going on.
It seems it's so hard to even get excited about the little victories along the way, because there's always something new right smacking you right in the face. I mean, the vote against the homes would have quadrupled the size of Bunnell. And you can't get excited and say, yay, they voted against that because now they got something worse.
Right. And there's just so much to it, and I think there's so much going on behind closed doors and behind the scenes, and then we, the people, get smacked in the face with what's next. And then when people stand up and plead from their heart and soul and gut about their properties and about our community, they're not being listened to by the leaders. So everyone who's watching this, please really think about who you're voting for, and whether there's a D or an R or whatever beside their name, think about who you're voting for, because some of these people in private groups with me are saying now, who's Adam Morley? How can we find Adam Morley? Because we heard he cares about the environment. And I chime in and I say, I know who Adam Morley is. I actually voted for Adam Morley a little bit ago. And we could have him in office right now helping us. And now you are all scrambling, looking to find out who he even is. And you could have had him as a leader listening to you.
Right.
So think about who you're voting for leaders. Because do you want them to listen to your heart and soul, or do you want them to say, your information doesn't matter, only the lawyer's information matters?
Right.
So
pay
some of the people are
attention to
having
the
that.
platform is basically what you're saying. What
Exactly.
are they running on? What do they stand for?
Exactly. Instead of if they have an R or a D beside their name. Are these people going to help you and listen to you? Think about that. Instead of just saying, oh, they just have an R beside their name, or they just have a D beside their name, or, oh, this is who my husband's voting for. So, really, how you're feeling inside matters. And some people are learning that your leaders are not listening to you. And some people are going to learn the hard way. And unfortunately, that's the position that we're in. And we've discussed that in this group about, do we just sit back and let it happen? And let them, James Carville's approach of, let it happen, let the world burn. And people have different views on that. And mine is, I want to stand up and say something and try to do what's right. I was at the doctor's office this morning, and some Republican women, they said, "Are you still doing the?" And they're quiet. They went like this, and I knew they would sign wave. And I said, "Yes, I am." They said, "We've seen you and your group on the news. Keep it up." And I said, "Think about that. If you can't come to the sign wavings, if you can't be part of, the out there outspoken, please send an email, or and thank you for encouraging us.
Right.
We've got to keep going." We have got to keep going, and I won't sit back and let the world burn, because somebody's got to say something. I believe, that's my belief.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're silent, we'll get what we deserve, unfortunately. Mark, what's going on? Kurt, did you have a question?
Do people talk about NIMBY?
About what?
NIMBY,
Not in my backyard.
not in my backyard.
Oh,
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah,
So you're educating me.
they're here because the people in Ormond and in Volusia County said NIMBY. NIMBY is not in my backyard.
Oh, well,
That's a very
the
old-
people of Ormond had a lawyer. And up until now, the people of Bunnell and Flagler County have not had a lawyer. And I really hope that what I'm hearing is true, that one is going to represent the people on the 23rd, because that's the only way to move forward with what we the people want at this moment in time. Unfortunately, is the lawyer spoke for Ormond.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's go on to Mark. What's going on with city government?
Well, unfortunately, there was a Wi-Fi disconnect issue with the meeting. I was not able to attend. I was trying to watch it through their YouTube, and they had at least 4 or 5 start and stops. So technology got in the way. It was just a workshop. I did look at the agenda, which only talks about the meat of what's going on, and I know that these actions for June are they're building preparation for the 25-26 budget. So it is imperative that we pay attention and understand and have a voice in what's going on with the sheriff's department and how much money and all that drama that's been going on. And I highly recommend that you watch my interview with Jim Manfrey, and we extensively talked about how the county sheriff partnered with Palm Coast over the years, and what the value is of the additional money that we all contribute annually above and beyond what we already contribute annually by our property taxes. So I'm often wondered, looking at my property taxes every year, exactly what I was getting from the county when I saw the amount they were taking. But further, there was an additional conversation that was occurring I wanted to bring up, and Vicki pointed on it as well. And as we see going on right now in society, people are stepping up. People are being louder. A lot of us in this room have Facebook pages and have involvement, and we really don't know what or how creative the conservative group can be and how hard they would work. And I was posed this question recently about, you guys know I do a podcast. It's out there for everybody to see. I use my name. I share with people who I am, and I don't believe in anonymity. If you see any comment I make on Flagler Live, as Merrill has done, I am completely transparent, and I say Mark Webb, Palm Coast, because hiding behind a pseudonym, hiding behind a false name, I feel doesn't really push free speech and what we see in California and other places where these people are out there. But the question was, am I afraid? Is there fear? Am I at risk? And I wanted to pose the question to this group who think that they're sitting here being recorded and they're making comments and they're sharing views. They're running for office. Is there a fear? Is there risk?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely there is. And it comes with that empowerment of the right of free speech. Is that when you stand on that soapbox, or like you did at Pride Fest when the truck was driving around with Trump flags, and there was opportunity to have interface. We have a huge rally coming up in Saturday, No Kings. And I'm pleading with everybody that's going to step away from the curb. Don't put yourself at risk. Don't be on the news for an interaction with people because it's what they want. Last night, our governor flat out said, if you protest and you even cross the line by an inch, we're coming for you. So I'm just curious if anybody else has thought their actions and the reactions that occur. Are any thoughts? You realize that you're public when you're getting recorded for this stuff.
Right.
I don't think, I would just react to the word fear. I'm aware of the fact that there could be repercussions, but I'm not afraid of them.
Good.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? That's important.
Yeah.
What would have happened in Concord in April of 1775 if people said, "Oh, I'm too afraid. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna stay at home rather than stand against tyranny." Yeah, go again.
I've been listening to the soundtrack of Hamilton all week, and it really gets my juices going.
Yeah.
Like, stand up, this is how it started, we're called upon again, 250 years later, but we're called upon again, and we're,
History repeats itself.
Exactly.
If history does not repeat itself, it certainly rhymes each time.
Well, for all those hundreds of thousands of soldiers and other volunteers that gave their life, freedom is not free. And it takes a sacrifice, takes an effort, takes one person, like Al and I love to talk about, Evaldi from Russia. And are all of us prepared? Are those people in California that are marching and looking in front of fully armed, weaponized military people?
and they're taking aim at right on camera, they're taking aim at the people who were reporting the news.
Right.
They shot.
One was
They
shot with a rubber bullet in the
They
forehead, and
Right.
a woman
And
from
they
Australia.
aimed and shot. I'm saying they
Yeah.
aimed right at her. It wasn't like crossfire, like people were trying to say. They aimed right at her.
Yeah.
So upsetting.
No, it's a rising tide of fascism, and we need to stand up against it.
So that's all I got.
Go ahead, Donna and Kurt, and then we'll go to Mike.
This morning, and I shared this on my Facebook profile, someone uploaded the HR1 Big Beautiful Bill into ChatGPT
Yeah.
and asked ChatGPT what it thought about it. And it was, I shared it with you, Meryl. I don't know whether you've seen it or right.
I've seen it, yeah.
What it is, it's a very scary thing, but I took time this morning to go ahead and load the bill up onto my version of ChatGPT, and I got some very interesting, I've got pages and pages, but I brought just a couple. But the key takeaways: federal power is increased significantly, expanded in nearly every area measured, especially around healthcare, immigration, and environmental control. State autonomy is reduced, even where states may currently have independent policies like sanctuary laws or environmental standards. Long-term impact on citizens is consistently high, signaling deeper systemic effects even when short-term consequences might seem manageable. This is very scary stuff, and I think that ChatGPT is doing a great analysis of this bill. And if you have a chance and you have ChatGPT, you might want to grab the bill, upload it, and ask questions, because the results you get are based upon the questions that you ask it. And I wanted to know whether we were all going to be hurt by this bill, and it seems that we are.
By the way, the bill is searchable, so that if you put in Social Security or Medicare, the word Medicare, it will take you to the places in the bill that discuss that, and you can read it for yourself.
It
Well,
is-
you've probably done
We
more than
should be,
most of the
but,
people
yeah.
that voted for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, legislators have admitted they didn't read the thing. They don't know what to do, and we're counting on them. And I'll include Randy Fine, who thinks he represents us.
Yeah.
Somehow we elected him. That's a story for another time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think anybody in this room is part of that weight.
No, but, well, you know what? Not all are guilty, but everyone's responsible. Okay, so we're responsible. Okay, for those of you who don't know, and we've mentioned this here as well, Trump took our district by 30%, but Randy Fine against Josh Wheel only won by 15%. And we'll wait to see, particularly now with Jolly having announced for governor, whether what Wheel will do. And I would certainly encourage him to run against Randy Fine again and again and again. Adam Borley has run for state legislature 19 times, I think, and if Wheel will continue to stay, I think he'll do better and better, and we'll get rid of Randy Fine, who's a heinous person. I'll say that right here now on camera. I'm recording.
Well, I think in regards to Randy Fine and the numbers squeezing up like you're talking about, is what I was saying about that private group in the Adam Morley situation is I think that there were probably a lot of Republicans who knew that Randy Fine was not a great choice, but they held their nose and they voted for him because he had the R next to his name. And so
Yeah.
here we are stuck with.
There's no question that we fight an uphill battle against the people with R's in front of their names.
We know people.
But they would love it if we would just say, throw up our arms and say, oh, we can't win, so let's just all go home. We have to keep trying.
We know so many people that they're friends with us, but they vote Republican.
Yeah.
They don't know why.
Yeah.
We've asked them, and they just, no, I don't want to talk about it, I don't know.
Yeah, they don't, that's just,
But
it's
they
a
just don't.
reflexive kind of thing.
And for a woman
Kurt,
to
never
feel obligated to vote the same way her husband does
Yeah.
is horrendous to me.
Yeah.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
But that proves brainwashing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And say
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Or control.
Yeah.
The husband over the wife.
Absolutely under control.
Yeah, once are those 20th century women? Maybe they're 19th century who live amongst us today. And
Yes,
I think one of the divides is that the right are generally 20th century people who were industrialized, creating goods economy, and we have moved on to creating services, and even beyond that to a digital world. But the right is still back in the 20th century. And
Democrats are being demonized and we don't know how to answer that. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, this is the problem of the immigration. They've got an issue, and the Dems aren't there to solve that issue.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to tell a story about my life. I was ordered into the streets when I was in the Marines in 1965, and there was a demonstration, for civil rights. So, there was a whole bunch of it. And I was given a 45 with 2 magazines and a nightstick. That was how I was ordered in to, in other words, confront the protesters. The Marines were just like, we don't want this. Just like the Marines there. The Marines are, this is not our mission. And I had an officer just standing out saying, do not take that gun out of your holster, do not do that. And then there's the second part of it, and if anybody knows about a 45, the second thing is to put the magazine and then lock and load, right? So I mean, he was just ready to grab me if I looked like I would do anything. Thankfully, the demonstration was very peaceful, and there was nothing like that. But the Marines just were totally.
It's a different skill set.
They didn't know how to handle that, and that's why they put an officer, and there was just 2 of us at this. It was at a gate for the base, and he was so scared because he would have ruined his career if we had gotten in any kind of situation where that gun came out and would be used.
Well, partly because it's illegal.
Yeah.
Where are the generals and the
that's it,
officers
yeah.
that are supposed to be supporting have sworn their oath to the Constitution?
Well, that's-
Okay, well,
And
Lily
not the
Lily and
president.
Vesper are gone,
And-
and
Right,
now
right.
you
They-
have,
From
anything
the chief
illegal
of
should
staff,
not be
the
followed.
chiefs of staff
Right.
on down, they've all been fired down, now they're replaced by yes men.
Yes.
At any
Yes.
rate, Mike Lieberger has graciously agreed, he's graciously agreed to be a salesperson and to sell us on volunteering and taking position on local commissions and committees and boards so that we can be involved. It also helps build resumes for future candidates. So, Mike, what have you found out?
Okay, first of all, let me give you a real quick, and I mean quick, background. Is I first ran for state representative in Seattle in 1966. I was 22, and so you can do the math.
Okay.
And
You're 29.
exactly, and so that was my start. And even though I was a Democratic nominee, I didn't win, but it was a terrific experience in the general. And so you fast forward 20 years, and I was in Oregon for over 50 years, and I ran for city council and got elected and became city council president. And in the meantime, in the different communities I lived, I was on the planning commission, I was on the water board, I was on the whatever budget committee, whatever was available, I was involved and trying to help my community. And so I've got a fairly vast background of that. And so then at Merle's directive, I went to the city here. Yeah, your directive.
Nobody pays that. I might be happy.
Yeah. And so I went, well, first of all, I tried to get on the website. Now, I'm in my 80s, so it doesn't work for me very well anyway. But I was unable to find anything there that it wasn't friendly for me. And so I went down to the city hall, and I went to the first person I found, and I asked them, who I would talk to about belonging to city committees or commissions. It was like deer in the headlights. They've never heard of the residents being part of the city. And so I was sent to another place, and it was the same look. And so then I finally found somebody that she didn't know anything either. Never heard of this. But she did get on the phone, and she says, well, I know somebody who knows stuff. And she was right. And so that person at least was able to give directions through this person to me. And so and then my wife was able to find this on the website. But so you can get the committees and which ones they are that the city has, period. And I thought there's not very many. The Residential Drainage Citizens Advisory Committee, the Beautification and Environmental Advisory Committee, the Code Enforcement Board, the Flagler County Housing Task Force Affordable Housing Advisory Council, the Planning and Land Development Regulation Board, and the River to Sea Transportation Planning Organization Advisory Committees, and then there's two of those. And then the Volunteer Firefighters Pension Fund Board.
I've been trying to get on that one.
Right, and then, so then what they did do is I'll just pass that around and everybody can
I was
look at
looking over
it
your shoulders.
if they care. And And so, what is available is apparently there is a position on the Code Enforcement Board, and there's a position apparently on the Charter Review Committee. And
Yeah, they're calling for volunteers now, citizen volunteers to review the charter.
yeah,
Yeah, that's, yeah.
so then they handed me this application, and I'm gonna send that around. But what my understanding was that you have to fill out the application, and then somebody, whoever that person is, will
The city clerk.
will assign you to that appropriate committee.
No, city council.
But that's what was inferred to me.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, anyway, let me pass that around. So that's what I found. If you ask me for one word that would describe what I felt, and of course I've had other experiences there too, but in this one experience, the one word would be dysfunctional.
Chaos, it sounds like.
In the event of the code enforcement, Mark was forced to resign from code enforcement when he became
On the planning
on the
board.
planning board. So that opening has been in the code enforcement since November when he was forced to resign. And so it's been out there all this time and nobody's made an effort to fill it.
Right.
Well, I resigned from the CAC, which was, deals with the TPO. They never filled that position.
No TLAs, please.
Oh,
Okay?
what?
3-letter acronyms.
Oh.
Don't use them.
Citizens Advisory Committee,
Good, go ahead.
which deals with they don't call it the River to Sea Transportation Planning Board, it's the Volusia Flagler
Right.
Transportation Planning. I resigned from that last October, and they yet to fill it. It's vacant
And why?
because of incompetence.
They're trying to find someone who has as much expertise and drive as you do, and they can't find that
Well,
person.
that might be.
Well, in my case,
But did you find it to be, okay, go ahead, Don,
Well,
then
in
I
my case,
want
the
to ask, go ahead.
the fire chief actually wants me on his pension board. But when I went before the pension board to get voted, on, and I was the only candidate. And when I went before them, they decided to hold off on any position selection because they wanted to, I think they said they wanted to go before the city council. And basically what it was they didn't want me because I was a woman, and it was
We
all-
suspect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and it was all men
Who
on
is
the,
they?
on the day.
Not
Who
because
is
you're
they?
someone.
The people that are already on the pension board, that have been selected to be on the pension board, we
Who
suspect
selected them?
the city council.
They're all
Well,
selected by
two
the
of them
city
were
council.
selected by the city council, two of them were selected from the pensioners. And then the one optional position was the one I was applying for, was selected by all of them. And there's 4 guys. And even though I've got really good educational qualifications, they just, they wanna pass me by.
Well, she just has
It's not,
better
not
credentials.
because you're liberal, it's because you're a woman?
I believe could be both.
Both.
Yeah.
So Mark, in all your experiences on those boards, how successful have those boards been at making deep dive recommendations to city council that were followed?
Well,
Last 3 words, that were followed.
Remove those.
That's why they don't want you on the committee.
Yeah.
well, we were really unhappy, the people on the Palm Coast Planning Board, because the city council overturned our recommendation recently
On the,
Ridiculous.
Storage.
on a storage facility.
but that's not the first time.
No.
But did you?
But we sent them something, I won't specify what it is, recently, and they sent it back, wanting to line out stuff and put stuff in. Well, we put the line stuff back in and lined out their stuff and sent it back to them.
Did you find, or did anybody ever find serving on one of these committees a satisfying experience?
I spent a long time on the code enforcement board, and I learned how dysfunctional the code enforcement system is, serving on the board. But it does a good service to the city if you can get the enforcement people to do their job.
So did you find it more frustrating or more satisfying?
It's both
Okay.
at the same time, and it serves a good function.
Yeah, no doubt. And have you found it satisfying?
I found it satisfying in
Yeah,
most,
okay.
in most cases, but I was in Oregon, which is a whole world different
Yes.
from here.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
Arnie, you were on one.
So I was
many
on-
universes different.
So I was on the County Park and Recreation Advisory Board 24 years, 17 as the chair.
Wow,
Um,
congrats,
Yeah,
fortitude.
they bounced me off of it right after the election, and I never got a reason why. In fact, I emailed Andy Dance 2 times why I wasn't reinstated. With the staff who wanted me to stay, of course, and never got a response. Never got a response from anyone from the county. But in any event, that's water under the bridge. However, it was extremely satisfying being on
Well,
Park and
okay,
Recreation,
good.
24 years. Did the commission actually listen to us? I don't know, that was a question. We mainly approved applications for anybody that wanted to rent a pavilion in the park or other ideas in the park. Fee waivers, that's what we had to vote on, fee waivers. I knocked down a couple of other things that I told you about. Maybe that was one of the other reasons why I wasn't reinstated.
Yeah.
There was an issue of a church that wanted to use our county parks for their services every Sunday on a fee waiver, and I was against it. I was against it loud and clear, and I said, separation of church and state, number one. Number two, there's a lot of other religious organizations who would say, hey, we don't need a building, we have a park to go to. So, it wound up being on hold, and it was on hold, and it was on hold, and it was on hold. And until I wasn't reinstated after the election. And possibly also somebody alleged that because I was known as the pulling up the signs for Harris and for women's rights on Belvedere. Be that as it may, very, very satisfying, very, very satisfying. I enjoyed it immensely, so anybody that wants to go on the committee, I think it's great. You ran for office, I ran for office 3 times, and great experience.
Yeah.
I lost by less than 1% every single time. Once I lost by 400 votes,
Yeah. So,
but a great experience.
Yeah.
and I asked that question to encourage others to step up and be on these boards, committees, and so on. Think you have something to say? Because otherwise,
Did you,
I have to.
you ran for office in this community, did you run for office in this community?
Yeah.
The county commission 2 times,
Here,
and then the council 1 time in 1999 when we became a city.
here.
Here.
So, and both of you came close, so that
Yeah.
gives some hope.
I missed the primary by 2 votes.
Yeah,
so-
yeah.
That was a record.
That's
That's
good
why
to hear.
we need to redouble our efforts to get the right people on
Yeah.
elected.
My problem was
Encouraging
that
news.
Democrats did not come out to vote.
I agree.
Yeah.
He's right.
That was my problem.
That's the
Worst
big
part,
problem.
all across
My
America.
Yeah, yeah, it's not just here.
Because I got a lot of
I don't know.
Republican votes because I was moderate,
Frustrating.
and at that time, both in 1998 and 2002, we were about equal, 50% Republicans, 50% Democrats at that time. there was a deficit of 1,600 votes, that 1,600 less registered Democrats came out to vote. 1,600 less.
If we could get the Democrats to get out and vote, we could win a lot of races. Just like you remember Courtney Vanderbilt.
Yeah, well, she was torpedoed by the other side.
Yeah, but
yeah.
she only lost by like 1,700 votes.
Yeah, no, and
But-
I'm talking about November, but you're right. If she had won in the primary in August,
Yeah.
in August,
Would've been
right,
different,
she
yeah.
wouldn't have had to stand for election
Yeah.
on November.
But
yeah.
the point I want to make is 14,000 Democrats didn't vote.
Yeah.
And she only lost by 17.
we have to reach these people.
If they'd have voted, she'd have
Yeah,
landslide.
yeah. So I'd like to change the subject if I may, and I have 3 questions, one of which was posed in the flyer to go out that went out this week. If you were here in the United States under temporary protective status, or if you were brought to the United States as a young child and now had grown up, and you were on the other side of Route 1 or somewhere around town, a carpenter, a roofer, an electrician, a plumber, would you report to work this week, next
I
week?
don't think so.
Would you? Okay, difficult question.
I don't think so.
Well, I said so-
Finances might demand that you do. I
Yeah,
mean, you know,
and that's what they've got a family.
You might not want to, but
Yeah. The second is, if Anne Frank were to come to your door next week and say, "I need a place to hide," would you put up Anne Frank in your house?
Absolutely,
And the
absolutely.
final question is, if an immigrant, temporary protective status, without a green card, they're picking up people even with green cards, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so came to you and said, "Would you hide me?"
Yeah.
Would you hide them?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's why I said, I related to Anne Frank, and would you hide such a person? Then, in which case,
And people are getting in trouble and being arrested for that. Look at the judge in, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Wisconsin? That would let someone who showed up to court to face what that man needed to face in court and was doing the right thing by showing up. There was ICE agents or authorities there to get him and take him away, and the judge allowed that person to leave
Go out of
in
back-
another
to
way.
go out of
And
back
so
door.
that judge got arrested.
and
So that would be us, if we allow someone to stay in our home that we realize the local sheriff's department is that, because I read that our local sheriff's department has so many beds available for these people.
Oh, yeah,
So that could be
We're
any
paying
of
for
us.
yeah.
we're all paying for it. I think that, for me, the interesting aspect of this immigration and the efforts that are happening with different administrations. Under the Biden administration, 300,000 immigrants were allowed to come into the country from various countries, including Afghanistan, were given temporary status, which we've done since before the Vietnam War. At the end of the Vietnam War, we brought in hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese and allowed them to immigrate and go through the process. So one administration says, come to the country, we'll help you get set up, you're done. 4 years later, a completely different administration comes in and says, no, that's no good, you all have to leave. So what happens in the next administration when everything, we can only pray that he's done, that his administration's done, that's on a executive order which can be immediately flipped around and canceled. And you have these people that are trying to survive, trying to live. I read a recent article, all of us are within 3 handshakes of an undocumented immigrant within our lives here in Palm Coast. Whether he just served you lunch or cleaned the dishes or was cutting your grass. And I said it in one of my earliest podcasts. The issue is two issues. The security of the border. Very important. We need to have a process where people can come in and not go through the cracks. We all agree. And then how to process them and bring them in, because we desperately need immigration to augment our workforce. And there's great documentation that shows we need at least about 15 million immigrants a year to come into our workforce to replace those of us that are retiring and moving on.
Along with that, so what has Florida done to make the adjustment? Ron DeSantis made an
They
adjustment that
well-
children, young children, can now work
Yeah.
later at night, and
Right.
and so our state is looking at young people instead of focusing on, after school activities or getting a good night's sleep, and so you can be prepared for school the next day. Our state is shifting to, hey, let's utilize these kids to do it, and because they're cracking down on immigrants.
And yet there's farmers in Central Florida plowing under their fields of tomatoes and other vegetables because there's no one there to pick them.
Yeah.
And they're not getting the,
You know, my eyes opened up by a neighbor of mine who was a member of the Republican Party, very, very conservative. We used to sit outside over a couple of beers and talk. Never really screamed at each other, although it was very difficult. However, after a couple of beers, we were talking, and I said to David, can I ask you a question and be honest with me? And he said, what? I said, if there was a vote by Republicans over here in the United States on whether to get rid of anybody that was not white Christian, what would the vote be, do you think? And tell me honestly. He stopped and he said, more than 50% would say get rid of them. I said, are you being honest with me? And he said, yeah. More than 50%. So that is the
Mentality.
mentality, or
It's just hate.
I was gonna say the aroma of the country right now, is that's why what Donald is doing is being supported.
Right.
well, I was watching this on Netflix. They're doing a great 5-part series on Ukraine and the history of Ukraine and Russia. And it goes way back to actually Joseph McCarthy and the Red Scare back in the 50s, and how that actually affected things in Russia. But there was this insane connection, and I never knew it. Does anybody know the name Roy Cohn?
Yeah, to Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Amen.
Do you know what his
Well,
claim to fame was?
Fred Trump.
Capone,
It
not
was-
Capone, the other.
McCarthy.
Yeah, McCarthy.
He
Yeah,
was
the Army
McCarthy's
McCarthy.
number one right-hand man assistant during the McCarthyism, back when they were going after communism under every rock and under everything. And then this guy survives all of that drama and everything, and then becomes the mentor, father figure of
Donald Trump.
our president.
Well,
It-
he was
I
Fred
had to
Trump.
stop
Right,
and
right,
just
have a Fred Trump.
take a breath and realize I'm watching this presentation, and it is painting this picture of this person who was actually the care and feeding of our president. And it connected so many dots of what we hear, how we hear what's going on.
What's the name of it, Mark?
Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine.
But Roy Cohen, yeah, we're gonna.
But I was like, oh my God, go
We'll
ahead.
go to Kurt and.
Just a thought.
Okay.
Well, no, as a teaching tool in my, because I got a master's in government, we saw the Army of McCarthy here in Congress, and I'm on the dais with McCarthy, and if it was Joe McCarthy's or Joe Kennedy's boys, you know, Bobby Kennedy's sitting next to, right there. I mean, and Joe Kennedy was a big supporter of McCarthy, and
Yeah.
this is a terrible
But
legacy.
things change. But Roy Cohen was the author of the policy of never admitting defeat.
Right.
Even if you lose the election of 2020, never admit that you lost. And so these are the people that we're here, and we need to sound like a rabbi, gird our loins and rise up. And because if nobody else does it, if nobody else stands at the bridge to Concord, Massachusetts in April 7th, if nobody else does it, we're finished as a democracy, I believe. So thank you very much.
Just a side with you. Does anybody know what happened to Roy Cohen?
He died.
Yeah, died of AIDS.
He died of AIDS because he was what?
Gay.
He was gay.
You should be aware of the Broadway show Angels in America.
Right.
Right.
And that will explain it to you. At any rate, thank you very much. We'll do it again next week, and look forward and thank you for your enriching contributions and conversation. See you next week.